Welcome to the Middle Ageish Podcast. Authentically and unapologetically keeping it real. Discussing all things middle-age-ish. A time when metabolism slows and confidence grows. Join fashion and fitness entrepreneur Ashley Badowski, former Celtic woman and founder of the Lisa Kelly Voice Academy, Lisa Kelly, licensed psychologist and mental health expert, Dr. Pam Wright, and highly sought-after cosmetic injector and board-certified nurse practitioner, Trisha Kennedy Roman. Join your hosts on the journey of Middle Ageish.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Middle Ageish Podcast. I am Dr. Pam Wright, and I'm here with my co-host, Lisa Kelly, and Trisha Kennedy Roman. And we are missing our third wheel tonight, Ashley. Unfortunately, she can't be here.
No.
We're going to miss her.
We do. We miss you, Ashley.
Yeah, we miss you, Ashley. But today we do have with us Rebecca Griffin. So excited to have you.
Hello.
So Rebecca is actually a good friend of mine. We went to the same high school, but I'm not going to tell you which one of us graduated earlier because we're just going to pretend we're the same age. But I've known her forever, and I wanted to have her on the show because we had a conversation after there was a girl that was murdered who was running at the University of Georgia. A very sad story. Mm-hmm. And we just started talking about it, and she was telling me like, oh yeah, like, you know, when people are looking for someone to attack, this is what they do. And you don't have to be like big to be able to fight people off and those kind of things. So the day I actually talked to her about this, she was going to get her pink belt, which is I was thinking, okay, black belt, where's pink belt? I've never seen a pink belt, even though my son did karate. But in jiu-jitsu, there's a pink belt. And that's why you actually went to this facility is because it's not about muscles, but it's about you can be small and use your height, everything to help fight and do some self-defense.
It's for smaller people or weaker people. And the course is actually called Women's Empowerment or Women's Empowered. And it's a self-defense course that has in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I didn't know anything about it at all. I haven't done martial arts in my whole life, never interested or anything. But I went to a free seminar and just learned a couple of small things. It was a 2-hour seminar. And the moves were so simple, and and they're not necessarily intuitive if you don't, understand it. But they were so simple and so effective, and I was just reeled in. And I thought, well, yeah, I definitely want to do this, and I want to, help other people too. So that was 2 years ago. And in this particular jiu-jitsu self-defense course, the end goal is to get a quote-unquote pink belt. And it's literally the color pink, so you're not wearing your white belt anymore. And the pink belt is only for this particular class. And it doesn't always take 2 years like me, but you could do it faster or slower. But it just happened to take me 2 years. So that's how I got started in it and became interested in it.
Yeah, but she sent me a picture of her face after she did the test. You have to do all these things, and they film you, and then they have to submit it to people who review what you've done to make sure that you did everything accurately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's videoed, which I hated. But you do the test, and it's about 45 minutes or so. And you go through all the moves, and you can take little breaks, but yeah, about wore me out. Our instructor, who's a black belt, he's a 5-degree black belt, he said, it's the hardest test out of all the belts, this women's course. So I thought that was like, well, thank goodness. So I don't feel too bad.
Wow.
But yeah, so I have my pink belt now, and it was, like I said, this was just out of the blue. It's not anything in my experience I've done before or interest or anything like that, but I'm glad I did it. So
Amazing.
There you have it.
So you just woke up one day and you're like, I'm going to do a women's self-defense course.
Yeah, well, I've always wanted to do some sort of self-defense, but a friend of a friend knew of this class. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, why not? I had a free Saturday, so I went up there and did it. And literally, it was the actual moves themselves. For example, wrist releases. If someone grabs your wrist, there's an easy thing to do I try it on my husband all the time, and a big guy, and I can always get away. So it was just blew my mind how simple it was. And like I said, I've never had experience with jiu-jitsu at all. But it's based on the principles. So it's not like they're preparing you to go fight at a competition or anything. They're preparing you to get away to safety if you're attacked. And I can continue going on if you want me to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to hear more.
And her husband, just so you know, is a wrestler. So he does wrestler. So he's like very big. Wow. So we were talking about like how if somebody were to attack us. I don't know. Since we've had this conversation, she always talks about, like, if you pull up to a gas station, are you aware if you're the only female there? Mm-hmm. We talked about how males don't have to really worry about someone stealing their, things or attacking them or things like that. But I'm never aware. I'm always getting out of the car with my phone, with my keys. Like, I'm never aware of my surroundings. And so now I'm like, getting out of my car.
And that's what they talk about kind of in the beginning. And some of the first things that you learn is in this particular class, and I'm sure there's self-defense classes that have some version of this somehow, but the first kind of things you learn are the 4 phases of an attack if it's by a stranger, which is identify an unsuspecting target. That's number 1. So, and then our instructor always told us that it's going to be someone who's maybe their shoulders are down, or they're looking down at the ground, or they're busy on their phone, or they're carrying a bunch of stuff in their hands and they're not paying attention to their surroundings, or maybe they've parked way off in a parking lot that's, isolated or something like that. And I've always heard, even before this class, that women with ponytails are always a good target because it's easy to grab.
Wow.
So that number 1 is identify an unsuspecting target is the first phase of an attack. So that's what the attacker would do. And then number 2 is to subdue and isolate the victim. And let's see, I wrote some notes down, but basically our instructor told us that this is the phase where you really want to do your best to try not to go with someone to somewhere else, which we've probably heard before in other scenarios. Just don't go to that second location, And so this is the point where someone's trying to grab you and physically move you away from where you are. And let's see here. And if they're at that point, if they're asking for something, like if they have a weapon, for example, if they're asking for something, or not really asking, demanding, like your money or your purse or some jewelry or something, at that point, just give it to them, because he always says it's never worth your life or getting hurt. So at that point, if you can get rid of them, that's great. But anyway, that's the stage 2. And then the third one, if they get you subdued and isolated, is that the attacker's goal is to control and exhaust you. Okay? And usually this stage ends up on the ground. And so there's tons and tons of moves in jiu-jitsu that when you're on the ground, it's actually to your advantage. It doesn't sound intuitive, but especially for women, because normally an attacker is going to be a sexual attack. But actually there's tons and tons of things you can do on the ground to defend yourself. And so he's always talking about, or our instructor is always talking about, you want to train and know these moves so well that when you're on the ground, you're doing the moves with a smile. Maybe not literally, but the idea of that you're not wearing yourself out and you're not like panicked and using up all your energy. Because you don't want to get exhausted at that point when you're on the ground, because, you're probably going against someone who's much bigger and stronger, and your stamina is probably not going to match theirs. Your strength is not going to match theirs. So you want to kind of conserve your energy. And if you know the moves well enough and the techniques of what they taught us, the theory is anyway, that you can do that just like with muscle memory, and that you're not using a lot of energy. And then obviously the 4th phase of an attack is for the attacker to carry out the assault. And hopefully, it never gets to that point. But those are the 4 stages. Identify an unsuspecting target, which if I could get a message across, and what I share with my friends is that's the number 1. And like you said, just become more aware of your surroundings when you're out and about. And think about the way you carry yourself. And I will tell you that after this course, I think about it all the time, particularly if I'm walking in a parking lot. I try to carry myself a little more confidently. Some of it's conscious and some of it's unconscious, because I feel kind of, if I can say this, kind of badass now.
I got my pink belt.
Yeah, with your shoulders back. And like let's say if you're in the mind of an attacker, if there's 2 people to choose from, am I going to choose the woman that is like walking confidently and with a purpose and is looking around, or somebody that's kind of like this, with shoulders crunched over or on their phone? So anyway, that first phase is very important to kind of understand and kind of make it part of your everyday life of thinking about it each time you go out And then just to repeat, the number 2 is subdue and isolate, 3, control and exhaust, and 4, carry out the attack. So that's for a stranger attacking you.
It's so funny because I think people's I know what I'm like on my phone. I sometimes get on my phone to avoid eye contact. So it's like the messages seem mixed because it's like, I don't want to draw attention to myself. And then sometimes I know what you're saying. You want to be confident, and if you look around, and I know we had this conversation off the air talking about making eye contact and talking to somebody, that they're less likely to attack you, but it just seems so strange to do.
It does seem strange, and I will tell you that when I first started, some of the things, and I'll tell you a couple techniques here in a minute, that didn't come naturally, and you don't necessarily think, or intuitively think, I would do that in this instance, or because you do want to, I don't want anybody to bother me. I don't want to get trapped in a conversation, and I don't want that gross guy, looking at me. So I'm just going to look straight at, So you kind of do have to consciously think about it for a while, and you kind of change your behavior a little bit. So, and unfortunately, I was telling Pam earlier that, I wish it wasn't the case, but for us women in particular, I know men can also be victims, but in particular women, that's just the state of affairs. So we just have to, bring it up a notch and protect ourselves.
Yeah. I do. At 4'11", when I get out of my car, I try to walk like a badass, and I act like I'm scared of nothing, even though I'm really scared of everything. Yeah. Because I want to look confident. So I've always kind of had that mindset without knowing. I wanted to look like, hey, I should be messed with, but
that's
really
good. Yeah.
I think the fear for me was always like, being on the subway in New York. And if you make eye contact with somebody on the subway in New York and they start shouting at you, you're like, oh, what am I supposed to do? So I think that kind of, and growing up in a city as well, you would never make eye contact with people on the street. But I do get it when you're on your own and you're in an isolated part. You want to make sure that you're confident and you're talking to them and you're moving, and just keep going and act as confident as you can. It's just, it's so hard to know what to do in the situation.
And another thing that kind of after we've learned these phases, one one of the first moves or techniques that he teaches us is, okay, let's say you do run into somebody that kept eye contact with you, and then maybe, he always gives the example, you're at a gas station, for example, pumping your gas, minding your own business, and some guy comes up, and maybe you glanced at him before, and he still keeps coming to you, walking, and says, can I get the time? Or, hey, can I borrow $1? Or a lot of times you'll instinctively feel either, awkward or creeped out, but also as women, we are kind of socially trained to be polite, be nice, and, can I help you? Or sure, I can give you the time. But what I learned in this is that you have to find your voice. So if you do have that encounter where someone is not letting go of your eyesight and coming closer to you or asking for something, one of this technique is called stop, block, and frame. So stop, that's the number one. You put your hand up like you're stopping traffic, and you have to find your voice where it's, strong and you mean business, not like, oh, stop. But you have to say, stop. I said stay back. Mm-hmm. And if it's a good guy and you just made a mistake and they really did want the time, a good guy is going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for, bothering you. I didn't mean to scare you. So, even if you're a little bit embarrassed for that awkward encounter, you're safe and you're creating a behavioral pattern for yourself. But if it's a bad guy, you've raised your voice, and maybe other people have heard you. You've drawn attention to yourself, and then you've kind of given the message like, I'm not playing around. Mm-hmm. You can stay back. And then if the person is still coming at you, there's some moves that you can do that easily push them out of the way. You wouldn't think it, but I tell you, it's just the wildest thing. I mean, you can have a 300-pound dude coming at you, and, you put both hands on their shoulders, and you kind of lean into them, and then use their weight and they're leaning towards you to kind of push them out of the way. It's kind of hard to explain with not doing it on a podcast. But the point of me explaining that technique was to find your voice. And us women don't have to be so polite, and I'm guilty of it all the time of, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My girlfriends at work, we always talk about, okay, you're going to owe $1 if you say sorry one more time for like some innocuous thing. So finding your voice and being okay with saying, no, stay away. This is my personal space, and really raising your voice. And I think you can get over the embarrassment if it's going to protect yourself, eventually.
That's great, but I would not. I wouldn't think to do that.
I would think
the time is,
that would be my response.
Yeah.
I still think in this day and age, it's amazing though still how men will approach you for things when they all know. I always assume that they know. I'm like, you must know that this is scary to us, but they don't seem to. They still like, I was out walking the dog a couple of weeks ago. It was super early in the morning and there was nobody around, and I live very close to the softball fields. And I had the dog with me. And as I was walking around, there's like a dirt road. There was nobody around. It was cold in Georgia, so nobody ever walks when it's cold in Georgia. And a car pulled up on the dirt path right beside me. But they kind of blocked me as I was walking with the dog. Now, I took one look in the car and I knew they were missionaries. So I was like, oh, great. It's okay. But I was still astounded by the fact that, I know they were young guys, but I was like, this is so wrong. There's nobody around. You've pulled a car straight up beside me and you want to talk to me. And I'm like standing away. And thankfully the dog was, he wasn't very friendly to them. But I was still like, it's so wrong. And I just don't understand in this day and age how men think it's okay to do that.
Because it's not something they have to worry about.
Think about it
so it's
ever.
Not on their mind.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
wild.
Crazy.
That is scary. Yeah, you would think that people would have more like social cues.
They were very
young.
young. They were very young.
Still.
But I did give the 2 local churches a call to let them know that
this is not okay.
To be honest, if I had been a different person here in Georgia and I was carrying, that might not have ended very well.
Exactly.
And I was trying to explain that it wouldn't, like, for these poor young guys out, trying to spread the word. So, yeah.
We were talking earlier, so I had a client that was telling me that she was in a different country, and they do, a lot of times there's like techniques and things that they'll do. Like if you look like you're lost and you're looking at your phone and trying to figure out where you're going. And she said that they just stepped away from the luggage for like literally 2 seconds to look at a phone, was because the guy was like, can I help you? But he was working with somebody else.
Yeah.
And so he's like, can I help you? And they're, oh, we're looking for this hotel. As soon as they said, we're just looking for this hotel, this other guy came by on a bicycle, got the luggage that had passport, everything, the entire trip, like ruined and like left. And you've shared a story about something similar. So
yeah, I took a trip, and I don't think I told you this, but back when I worked at Delta, I was going to just take a trip by myself because, it's easy to fly when you're an employee. And so I decided just to go to Peru at the last minute. And this was when I was single. And luckily, my mother, who also worked for Delta, decided at the last minute to come with me. And the reason I was lucky is because I got robbed on the way from the airport to the hotel we were staying at, because the person broke the window of the cab we were in and literally launched inside the cab and grabbed my bag that I had kept on the floorboard of the car, which had all my money, some special items and things like that. So, of course, I freaked out. And luckily my mother was there, so I had, someone.
Yeah.
And it's a long story, but what I was telling Pam was that one thing that I learned for sure is like keep your important documents and your money on your person.
Yeah.
And especially, we're talking about especially going international, because I've had a friend that pickpocketed, lost their phone. So you just feel so violated, and then you're somewhere you don't really know well. Yeah. And you're without anything. But yeah, it definitely opens your eyes, and I'm more alert even when I travel now, too. So
I'll tell you what, I came back from a trip late at night. I took a red eye, got home, and got back to the carport or the car parking area. I couldn't remember where I parked my car. So I was like doing loops and loops. I kept hitting my little alarm button trying to find my car. Couldn't find it. And there's a group of 2 guys that kept circling around. It was like 2 a.m. They kept circling around the parking deck. And I thought, I'm about to die. There was no one around. And my thought was, if they get me, I'm going to claw the heck out of them, so at least they can get my DNA or their DNA out of me. Yep. I was so terrified. I thought, I'm done, but I'm going to fight. Like, I'll get out and get some DNA on my fingernails.
To live like that,
but I was thinking that the whole time. Yeah. I'm like, they're going to have a fight before I go down. That's all I know. That's what I was thinking.
I think it's sad how many people, though, like even my clients have stories like that, where it's just like one kind of random thing and you're not thinking about anything, and then suddenly there are people and you just have that feeling, that fear that just kind of comes, like even if you're crossing the street, and so they always like, okay, go to the other side, like you read all of the things to do, but in that moment it's just terrifying, and you're just thinking, oh gosh, what do I do? How do I get away? And part of like what we were talking about, because obviously my daughter's getting ready to go to college and she's like 5'1" and like tiny, like, barely 100 pounds. And I was thinking, wow, what if something, the whole UGA thing, she's going to college there. What if that had been her? Because she exercises and those kind of things. And so what I liked about what you were saying that I think would be good for her and like all of us is like, it's not about your size, that you can really work with, your size and angles and things like that to help get someone like away and to get to safety.
And the big thing with this particular class and the art of jiu-jitsu itself is our instructor always talks about you use space and leverage. Those are the two words I was trying to make sure I remember, because one thing they always say is that whoever the person that controls the space controls the fight. And includes not just, as I was describing before, when someone walks up to you and you try to keep the distance before they get in your personal space. That also means if I'm down on the ground with someone and someone's like kneeing down between my legs and has their body over top of me, there's moves in this course that I took. And again, disclaimer, I am no expert by any means, but this just really spoke to me and I was able to really latch on to some of the principles they were talking about. But when you're in close, you can use your arms and forearms together to form like a frame against someone. Because what you don't want to do is, if I'm on the ground with some huge guy, I'm not going to try to punch him. Because if it becomes a punching fight, obviously I'm going to lose. Because I'm not as strong, I'm not as big. So I have to use other ways to control the space between me and him, create space between me and him so I can do certain moves. One of the moves that's famous is in this jiu-jitsu is the shrimp move. So it helps you get out from under them, and then you can use your legs to kick at the person right in the face. I mean, it sounds super violent, but it really works for people who are smaller. And our instructor says actually there's tons of advantages if you're smaller. Even if you're in a competitive sport with jiu-jitsu or other martial arts, this particular one is almost advantageous for a smaller person. It's harder for the bigger person to find those spaces within. So I thought that was super cool. These are things that they're not on my radar at all, that I would never think. And that's why, to me, like some of the moves weren't intuitive at all. I had no idea how I would do that. Because usually in the beginning of our class, he'll say, well, when he's demonstrating a move for the first time, it's, okay, what do you think is a common reaction to, some guy pinning your arms back above your head? And then we'd say, you wiggle or you try to pull them down. And you do a lot of the opposite of what you think. So that's why I think it's important for women to take a class. If it's not this one, I mean, there's many other types, but this particular one made sense to me. And I just thought it was cool how, the physics of it all.
So this wasn't just a local thing. The pink belt is something that's like nationwide?
The particular class I went to is Gracie Balance Academy in Peachtree City. And the Gracie name, for those who aren't familiar with this art, is a very popular name. It was a guy back many years ago that formed Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he got it from the Japanese, I believe, but he kind of modified it for himself. And his whole family is the name Gracie, and they're all over the United States. I think they're headquartered in California. So I'm not an expert on the history either, but it's all over the country. These academies or studios where they have classes for kids for like bullying and things like that, how to defend for kids in the women's one. And then they also do ones that are more traditional classes where people who may want to compete or spar with people and things of that nature. But right now, all I really know about is the women's one.
What was the most shocking thing that you heard in that whole class? What was the thing that surprised you the most?
That the smaller person is an advantage, honestly. And our instructor, he himself is not a huge guy, but he's a 5-degree black belt. So I'm sure he could probably take me down with a pinky. But he was really good at telling stories about when he was a kid and when he first started learning it, how he was able to, use some of the techniques against bigger people. And just some of the simple moves that make the biggest difference. It's hard to really understand it until you kind of see it yourself, but And, I'm not necessarily a commercial for this particular class, although I love it and I would recommend it. But any kind of self-defense, I think, is good for women to pick up. And I think there's some universal points, too, like the be aware of your surroundings type thing. And also just what you get out of it. So, for me, what I got out of it in general is, a little more air of confidence. I'm not too much of a physical active person. I'm not a sports person or anything like that. But just being able to, I can do these things. I never knew I could do that. And so the feeling of confidence and just having an accomplishment. And that, for my brain, how it works, I thought it was really good to have like an end goal, of the, pink belt. That's what I'm, striving for. So that kind of helped me continue on and stay with it because I wanted to accomplish something. And I've also found one thing I really liked about it was all the women, gained friends from it, and we're all very supportive of each other. And I thought that was just super cool. And I had so much help when I told some folks that I was going to be testing for the pink belt. So many of the women were, took extra time with me and helped me train and drill and all of that, and were very encouraging. So, I'm all about empowering women, and literally, so that's the name of the class. But I like that aspect of it too, because it's kind of like a sisterhood, and I thought that was cool. So
I think two things that we talked about that would be interesting. One is, not to be too much information, we were talking about choking and how, I guess, you think, the stronger you choke, the better, but it really is about how strong you do it, but the duration. Mm-hmm. So that part of it. And then also you were saying that you train about how to get a weapon from someone, but if you get the weapon, you have to use it. You can't just get a weapon and then try to run or leave. So that's a hard, I think women would have a lot of thought about those things.
Yeah, on the choking thing. So you can use, they give you some techniques on how to choke someone if you needed to, if there was an instance where you needed to. And they're very careful about how they teach that. And you work with a partner throughout the class, so you have to be careful. You don't go full force or anything like that. But we were taught that, okay, if, hold a choke, you can have someone pass out unconscious within 6 seconds. If you hold it longer than that, they're going to be out for a lot longer time. 30 seconds, you can start creeping into a time where they might not come back. Mm-hmm. And so, again, this goes back to the training where you want to have that in the back of your mind when you're performing that particular technique of choking, because you use in your brain time versus strength. So if I'm going to choke you, I'm going to try to, if you can, count in seconds, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 6. And that can, give you some time to get away if you need to. But you may be in a crazy circumstance where you can't get away to safety really quickly, so you can take further steps to make that person, go out longer, or if you have to, have them never come back. And so those are things you train on. And again, I would never have known any of those kind of things about how long it takes.
About strength.
Yeah.
You think it would be.
Matter of fact, they tell you when you perform the choking moves, you should start slowly, rather than expending all your energy at once and doing it really hard, because you're going to get tired. And out of that battle, if you're doing it really fast versus the guy that's trying to survive that, he's going to outlast you. Mm-hmm. So that's why you kind of want to perform a choke slowly and use that counting in your brain to kind of gauge where you are or what you're going to end up with, so to speak. Yeah. You mentioned the weapons. Do you want me to talk about that for a second? Okay. So whenever we did a weapons class, and I don't handle weapons on my personal life or anything like that, so I was completely out of character, or not character, but just it's completely new to me. And so he always took it very seriously, and we practiced with rubber knives and rubber guns. And so the idea is, if someone's coming with you with a weapon, kind of to harken back to what I spoke about in the beginning, the first thing is, if they're asking for material things, just give it to them. It's not worth it. Your wallet, your purse, your watch, your jewelry, just go ahead and give it. It's not worth, getting injured, for sure. And then if it's a situation where they want more than that, if they're, obviously trying to sexually assault you or, physically harm you, you have the ability to make a decision. If you're willing to put up a fight or not. If you decide, yes, I'm going to fight this, then there's techniques to disengage the weapon from them. And if that happens, you have to be willing to use that on the person. So when you say at some point in the technique, you say drop the weapon, because after you've broken their arm, for example, and you pick up the weapon, you need to use that, because the problem is if you don't, then there's a chance that they could come back and use it on you. And most likely they would at that point, because they're going to be super mad that you just did all these cool moves on them and hurt them, So you have to have that mindset too. And again, that goes back to training and just being really comfortable with the moves and knowing what to do, so that you're not, deep in thought when you're at that moment and have that moral decision of, oh gosh, this means I might be taking someone's life. It just has to be kind of muscle memory, and you just know what to do. So if you made the decision to put up that fight, then that's what you need to do. And then sometimes it's a win if you just survive. And I don't think that you can always, there's not necessarily one better way or the other. It's your decision how you want to, if you are just there laying there and, waiting, if you survive, that's a win too. So there's lots of, I guess, theories and philosophies about how to do all that and the best methods. And I'm sure there's other classes that have different takes and things of that nature. So it's just something to think about. And I think even if we're just thinking about it and talking about it, I think that is important, because it gets our mind thinking about, protecting ourselves in general. So
I think one of the simplest things you said was probably the most useful for me, because I still think until I took a course and had more confidence, I'd still freak out in the end or just take out running instead. But I think the whole stop if someone's approaching you, because that would feel awkward and embarrassing. But you're right. If it's somebody normal who's not trying to cause a problem, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, this chick's crazy. I'm going to leave her alone, So that's one time to look crazy and be embarrassed, I guess. So I think that's really useful, because that's something I think I could do for sure.
You like I said, if it's a good guy, they're going to be, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. And we have to get over that as women, particularly, of being a little bit embarrassed or, being a little bit, having that awkward moment with someone. And then you can, if it's a good guy, then you can just kind of laugh about it and say, oh, well, it's whatever. Okay, you really do need the time, and, go on about your life. But if it's a bad guy, then you want to do what you need to do. So bring attention to yourself and like I said, find your voice is the other thing.
Just wish the good guys were just a little cleverer sometimes and not approach you, It's just, if we could just teach them that.
But you make a good point, because as a mother of boys and as a mother of boys, what would you teach them or tell them to because they don't think about fear in the ways I think that females do. I think of a college student, a male, is not thinking about fear like a female student walking around campus by herself, or like you walking around the airport, looking for your car by yourself. They may have been there to help you, legit, but you don't feel it that way, and they wouldn't see how you feel things. Does that make sense?
I know we also had this conversation before, and I think sometimes, unless they look really scary, you're not as scared. So if a good looking guy approaches you, you're not on guard. You're kind of, whereas if somebody looks a little dodgy, you're going, I'm going to keep away from them. But it's just so hard for women. You just don't know who's a predator and who's not.
Well, because it's crazy. Some of the biggest predators were very normal looking or handsome looking. So.
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
My head.
And most women are killed by people they know as well, which I also think is the crazy situation, because then your guard is completely down. But when it's random, at least maybe in some way you have that chance to react. But I think when, somebody is your attacker.
That's actually a perfect segue into one other thing I was going to mention, if I have a few minutes, is that you remember in the beginning I talked about the 4 stages of an attack of a stranger. There's actually the same thing, 4 stages of an attack for a non-stranger. Wow. And the first one is intrusion. And that's basically little tiny moments, every day, and they may build. It may start with just touching your hand, or then the person may, gently rub up the shoulder the next day. Then it might be to a small, messing with your hair, or then rubbing your back. And you might feel, and we've all felt that, at least I have, that many times, because people like to invade your space and not think about that's your person, that's your body. So those little everyday things that may happen. So if someone has bad intentions, they're probably going to start with those little tiny intrusions every day. It could be, a coworker or a family member or a friend that they just get a little bit more into your personal space. So that's stage one for a non-stranger, those little intrusions. A second stage is desensitization. So they've done it so often, they're kind of numb to it. So you're not necessarily thinking about it now as what it really is, because they've done it so often. I mean, you become used to it. The third stage is isolation, which, as you remember in the other one with a stranger, the same kind of thing. So this person, if they know you, they may know your schedule. They may know your interest and know where you'll be. And then they may know where is a good opportunity where you're going to be alone or something like that. So that isolation and getting you away from people to carry out some sort of attack, which is the fourth stage. So if they have you isolated and they're able to overcome all your techniques, if you've learned any, then they'll carry out the attack there. So I thought that was another interesting aspect of this. What I've learned from this class is those little steps for people that know you, because I've really had that happen more, now that I'm really thinking about it, I've had that happen more than I would have imagined. You've probably felt this in your own life. Oh, that's a little creepy. I don't like someone to come rub my back. I don't know you that well, And again, that's when you have to find that voice within you, just like with a stranger where you're saying you have to put your hand up and say, stop, stay back. Well, with someone that if they put their arm on you or your shoulder or whatever, you say, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Can you please step back out of my personal space? Again, us women, we're going to be, we've been trained to be polite and, not make anybody feel bad, but you got to get over that. You just got to stand up for yourself. It's your body, it's your personal space. And if it's making you feel awkward, just say, you don't have to be, necessarily mean or yell it. Just be assertive. And hopefully, someone will get the picture and just say, that's making me feel uncomfortable. I don't need you to do that. Can you back up, please? And use that assertive tone. So, yeah, you have to think about that in your everyday life, too. So,
I think kids are getting better at that, though. I mean, they're definitely better than when we were younger.
Yeah.
Like I can see a difference in, I always remember the boys on the bus, and I was always saying to them, you're not to put your hands on somebody else's body. Like, even as kids going, you do not touch another person's body, keep your hands to yourself, don't do anything. But I do think that message with kids is better now than it was when we were growing up, because I think we were stuck in that. You have to be polite, and I think we're getting better. Certainly our daughters are getting a little bit better at that.
And I think because our parents our age are also bringing it up more to the kids. My best friend, she talks to her kids. He was in elementary school about knowing what consent is, So, and I, as a mother of a young boy, I want to teach him those things, consent also. But as I think you were talking about earlier, so they know and understand personal space and know that they just can't walk up to a girl and just put their hands on them and it could be for even, innocuous reasons. They don't have bad intent, but they should, I hope to, explain, and hope my son understands why that is not acceptable or appropriate. Because I don't, it doesn't necessarily come naturally, especially if you never talk about it. So hopefully we're raising good boys. Yes. Is all I can hope for.
I think it's cool the fact that you said that, because I picture a lot of times with this self-defense is that more someone who's already really athletic, because I would, croak if I was in a boxing competition or karate. So it's cool to hear you say that you got that confidence just by learning the appropriate maneuvers, and you don't necessarily have to be a bodybuilder or really athletic to do those things.
I am not the picture of an athletic person, but anybody can do these techniques. Even if you're, you don't have to be an Olympic athlete, and you don't have to be massively big or strong necessarily. And for me, it was easy, simple things that just made it worth trying to really understand. So I think it's important for women to find something that they feel comfortable with, because I've never done any of these kind of classes. So, And as our instructor says, sometimes when we have, seminars or the first class, just the person walking in the door, sometimes that's the win for that person, because it takes a lot if you're not used to it or if you're a little intimidated, thinking, oh, this is related to jiu-jitsu. But you don't have to know those kind of things. You don't have to be athletic. You don't have to have certain qualities. So you do have to find a place or a class or things that make you feel comfortable enough to stick with it so you learn about it. Particular one just happened to be, find me at the right time in my life. So, which I'm very thankful for. So, yeah, I'm promoting all self-defense classes. But of course, I love this one.
Though. Yeah. I've never done one either. I mean, it feels like something we should have all done at some point of in our lives, because we spend most of the time being terrified. So it's like it should have been something we did.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I ever since I was a teenager, if I was in the parking lot, I don't know if this was from an Oprah show. Keys, walk with that one key sticking out, ready to fight.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So, and I don't think about that as much as I should, but I do think that as females, we have an issue of finding our voice, and I feel like what you said about finding your voice is the biggest part for some people, and I feel like obviously Peachtree City, the bubble, people are, there's not much crime here, there's not much, but I've had several clients, carjacked, attacked, stolen, whatever, it's everywhere.
Most recently, I think, with Lake and Riley, I mean, that was just such a heartbreaking case because she was just jogging, on a campus, which you would think would be safe in the morning, so it's not like a late night out, in an isolated area. So I think that just with that, it just makes us remember it can really happen anywhere, anytime, and not necessarily in a place that seems, a dangerous place. So.
Exactly. Yeah, just be prepared, and hopefully, something bad could still happen, but at least you're as prepared as much as you possibly can be. You want every advantage if you can. Yeah.
So. I think the other thing, and this is off topic, but I was watching something, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, but like a bullying situation, and this girl was really she almost died. She was in the hospital in critical condition, but everyone's watching and filming, but people don't really intervene. It's kind of like that stranger bystander. People don't get involved.
I just can't imagine. I mean, we always hope, or at least I think, surely I would do something. Surely I would step in. Of course, kind of.
I think the mom instinct, you'd have to.
You have to. But I mean, it's so interesting how people don't. And that's one of the big psychology studies. It was in New York. There was a girl that was getting beaten and was yelling out, and she actually was killed. And the next day they interviewed people and talked to them, and most everyone heard, but everyone thought that somebody else was calling, or somebody else was calling the police, or somebody else was doing something. And actually no one did anything. And so I think about also not just that person and that struggle, but what we can do if we ever are cognizant or aware of someone going through something, and how we can jump in and help, or train boys and sons and people to help, and don't approach somebody in a certain way, ways and techniques to go about helping others.
I think about what I tell my son almost every day is, is there anybody you can help today? Who are you kind to today? Make sure you're, and again, it goes back to that, hopefully we're raising really good, strong, helpful, kind men eventually that know all these things already and aren't trying to catch up when they're adults, so it's ingrained in them. So I'm trying to do my part with my son. That's all I can do. So, and hopefully encourage others, because I tell you what, ladies, if I can do this, anybody can. When I went back and took my test, Pam mentioned in the beginning how I showed her a picture of myself after the test. My face was so beet red. I thought I was going to pass out because I was nervous first to take this test, and then I had some adrenaline going, and it is quite an exhausting test just naturally. But if I can get through it, I think anyone can, and hopefully, someone hears me and they're encouraged to maybe try something they never thought they would do. This, like I said, this is out of my realm. But I feel so accomplished, and it's so worth it. I have an actual legit skill to help myself. And I'm going to continue learning with and training, because I want to keep that skill up, and hopefully I'll never ever have to use it. But I like sharing the information because I thought it was so So cool.
Well, I love that. And I think we're all women, so we're talking about pink belt. But I think, honestly, like, as I'm thinking about this, I'm a mom of boys, to have them take a self-defense, because obviously we're all vulnerable. So just how we respond in those situations, I think is really important. So thank you so much. You have been awesome. And it's such a great message that you have. It gave me encouragement that I could maybe.
We're going to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going
to do it. I'm going to bring all the girls in my house to go do this. Yes.
So we're actually going to host a self-defense class. So I will tell you when we do.
Oh, that's
We've
so
been
good.
working it out. So
Excellent.
yes.
Amazing.
So good.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
all
you,
for joining us.
ladies.
Cheers.
Cheers. Self-defense.
Being badasses.
Thank you for joining the ladies of the Middle Ageish Podcast as they journey through the ups and downs of this not young, but definitely not old season of life. To hear past episodes or make suggestions for future episodes, visit www.middleageish.com. That's www.middleageish.com. You can follow along on social media at Middle Ageish. Also, if you have a moment to leave a review, rate, and subscribe, that helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Middle Ageish Podcast.